There's a huge story going on right now in London that I feel like is very big over there in London, but it's not quite as big over here in the States or anywhere else for that matter. Maybe in Europe, but definitely not over here. And that is of the Grenfell Tower fire. Now, you may have seen this in passing if you watch CNN, MSNBC, etc. It was a giant tower that was on fire, completely engulfed in flames, looking like World Trade Center. Now, I'm not making any kind of jokes or anything like that. I'm being serious. You can see the picture on the screen before you of how bad the inferno was. Now, this story is very big, not because of the dramatic nature of the fire. That's one reason, but because of all the things that surround it. How the fire started, why it started, a class warfare kind of thing, and etc. But before we get into all of those ancillary things surrounding the fire, I just want to tell you how the fire itself started and when it started. Now, the fire happened right around 1 o'clock in the morning their time on Wednesday, June 14th, 2017. The tower is 24 stories, it has 20 stories of residential area, and you have 120 flats, as they call it, or apartments total in the building. There could have been as many as 5 people for each flat, because one thing about this tower that's important to understand, because it kind of impacts what happens afterwards or what has happened afterwards. It's council owned, which means that it's a project building, right? It's owned by the government. It's government housing, public housing. So that's very important to understand. So when you're talking about government housing, you can have an apartment with a whole family in there, 2 families in there. These are poor people. So you're not really going to have single people in there. It's going to be entire poor families. So that's important to understand. So 1 o'clock in the morning, middle of the night, you could have had as many as 600 people inside of the tower when it was on fire. Now, the fire started allegedly on the 4th floor, according to witness testimony. How did it spread throughout the entire building so rapidly? And how did the death toll rise so much when the fire just was started on 1 floor? The protocol for firefighters is to tell people, if you're in a high-rise building like that, when there's a fire going on, just stay where you are, because they're able just to go to that one apartment and put the fire out right there so it does not travel. Right? Or like in the 1 floor, it can contain itself. But what happened here was they renovated this building. I think it might have been last year that the renovations were complete, and they put some really pretty cladding on the outside. And I'll put a picture of it before and after on the screen before you can see how it looked before and after the cladding. Now, if you don't know what cladding is, it's basically an exterior skin or a shell that goes on top of an existing structure to make it look different or to behave different. And in this case, it was a little bit of both. And I think the environmentalists could be to blame for this, and also people that want to make the city just look a little bit better, look a little bit more appealing, make that area of the city look less blighted, because it is a poor area, North Kensington, West London. So what they did was they put some aluminum composite sheets, some of which have been banned in the US, by the way, because of a fire hazard, which we'll get to and in just a little bit here. But they had those sheets over top, which made the really pretty outside structure look the way it is. And then underneath that, in between the new structure, the cladding, and the old wall, you had insulation, right? And you had an air pocket, obviously, because you have a space in between the cladding and the old wall where you have the insulation. So people that were on the ground that witnessed it said that the fire started on the lower floor and then it shot up, right, like a chimney. The air pocket created between the cladding and the old structure acted as a chimney, and then the insulation became an accelerant. So then the fire spread like paper. It's like when you just set a piece of paper on fire and you see how the fire expands. That's kind of how the building went ablaze. So that is how it spread from one apartment or 1 floor to the entire structure very quickly. And the firefighters probably were not really used to dealing with anything like this, because they were telling people as the fire was going on, stay where you are, when in reality they could have left, right? Because the fire at that point had not spread, but it eventually spread. So people that were told to stay in their apartments may have died in their apartments. And that's where the government cover-up comes in, because some people are saying, well, it was 17 people. Well, at the beginning, the news media, maybe even the government, was saying, well, it was 17 people that died. Then it became 30. Then it became, I think, 58 or 70. Now they're saying it could be as many as 100. there's people walking around with missing t-shirts. Can you find my daughter, my husband, my aunt, my uncle, my brother, my wife, etc., etc.? And it's only been 72 people that have been accounted for so far, and as many as 70 that are actually confirmed dead. So that's only 140 people by my estimation. I'm not Albert Einstein, but that's a lot less than 600. So where's everybody else? There's all kind of food, clothing, etc. out there for people, but the people are not really going to come back. Everybody that has been accounted for has been accounted for the most part. So now it's just a search and recover, not search and rescue, because if you were in that inferno, there's no way you could survive. So now the question has to be, how did this happen? Why did it happen? Let's go back to the renovation. The renovation cost a whopping 10 million pounds. I think it took about 4 years to complete in total. And for some reason, they did not install sprinkler systems. Sprinklers would have cost them less than 200,000 pounds. I've seen stuff in the media over there in UK. I've seen a couple of explanations and excuses. First, they're saying that people were resisting the sprinklers because it would have took too long. They wanted to get on with the renovation. They wanted hot water heaters and stuff like that replaced. But at the same time, they said they had smoke detectors. So I'm like, okay, if you install smoke detectors, then why not install the sprinklers? Why have a smoke detector with no sprinkler in a big high-rise building like that? And by the way, there's only one way in, one way out. There's one staircase. There's no fire escape. I mean, that might be kind of impractical to have a fire escape in a big building like that. But what I'm saying is that there's only one way in, one way out. So if that is blocked, you have no way of being able to get out. You just got to stay by your window, and hopefully you get a truck to come up there and rescue you. And by the way, the fire trucks can only reach up to maybe about a quarter of the way up the building. They cannot reach high like that. I don't think they're really suited to reach up to a structure that's that big and extinguish the flames at once. They're used to dealing with smaller structures. If it's a high rise, they're used to going to the specific place in the building and then extinguishing the fire right there, rather than trying to do with a whole giant structure of, 220 feet on fire all at once. The cladding is responsible for this, and I think the people that try to make the tower look pretty put beauty and aesthetics above safety, because the sprinkler should have been the first thing. You shouldn't even done the cladding. I mean, the most important thing was the sprinklers. There's been concerns about fire happening in the apartment building before. There's carbon monoxide concerns. Those things should have been addressed first. The safety. It doesn't matter what the people think that live there. It's public housing, right? They're there probably on the government dole. Whatever the government says for your safety, that should be the main concern, rather than the resident saying, well, it's going to take too long. It's going to be inconvenience. I'm not blaming the residents at all. I'm blaming the government. They got blood on their hands, in my humble opinion. I've heard that Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, and if you don't know who that is, I'll put a nice little quote from him on the screen before you. But I'm going to move on from that. Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, allegedly did not vote or voted against requiring all buildings to have sprinkler systems in them. I think it was something about buildings before 2007 being required to have sprinklers. I'm not really sure about that. I've seen that in tweets and stuff, but if you live in UK, you can give me a little bit more information about that, about how that whole thing transpired. But one thing we do know was that there were no sprinkler systems, and the cladding was extremely flammable. Some of the materials used were banned in the US. And just logically, if you have a space in between the new cladding and the old wall with insulation in it, all of that's flammable right there. And the air is going to make it worse, because everybody knows that fire is fanned and fed by air. So if you got an air pocket where air can shoot up quickly, that's going to make the whole thing, the whole structure, just burn quickly. And back to some of the excuses that have been made. Some said that, oh, well, if you had sprinklers, it wouldn't have been a big difference because you can't have sprinklers on the outside. But I'm like, the fire from the outside spread inwards. So if nothing else, the sprinklers would have gave somebody a fighting chance to survive. Maybe if you had sprinklers in the stairway, people could have escaped, because the fire went all the way throughout the entire building. Nobody could escape. So maybe, just maybe, the sprinklers would have helped. I've also heard that there was some flammable material in the actual stairway itself. So maybe if safety was a primary concern, then this wouldn't have happened. I say rest in peace to all those that have died. This is very, very shameful. And I'll make one last point here. I've also heard that the renovation was done and the way it was done with insulation and stuff like that because of green energy concerns. I'm not sure if that's true or false, but if you're talking about green energy and aesthetics and all those kind of things without being worried about human safety, you got to ask yourself what's really going on here. Are the environmentalists so anti-human that they'll put people's lives in jeopardy? That they'll say, well, do this renovation for 10 million pounds, but don't put sprinklers in there. Don't worry about the fire hazard that having a big gap in between the cladding and the old wall structure, and then having flammable material. I mean, obviously flammable material in between that with air. I mean, that's just the combination for disaster. The safety protocol was terrible here. And I just pray for everybody that has lost a loved one. Hopefully this does not happen anymore. A lot of the stuff that was used in the renovation is banned in the US. It should be banned everywhere. But the bad thing is that this is not the only place in London that has this kind of renovation on it. It's cladding everywhere, similar to what has happened here. And I think some of the green energy policies have been enacted in other places in the UK, not just London. So I think this should be a wake-up call to all those places that, hey, you are not safe. You are in a dangerous situation. If you live in a high-rise, you might want to move to the bottom floor or something like that, because you don't want to be caught 1 o'clock in the morning with your whole building on fire. You got the fire department telling you to stay where you are because they don't even really know what's happening. They're following the protocol for things where they're supposed to be, not because of faulty design in an apartment building that is going to basically be a tomb and an inferno. So what do you think? Do you think this could have been prevented if they did not put the cladding on the exterior, if they did not put the insulation in between the cladding and the old wall, if they had put sprinklers, basic sprinklers, would have cost them a fraction of the cost for the total project in the actual buildings? Safety should come first. It should not be about, well, let's blame the people that died because they didn't want sprinklers. No, it's public housing. You do what's best for your citizens. That's why you had the public housing to begin with. Do you think the environmentalists had a role to play in this because of the green energy concerns with the insulation on the outside to keep the heating bills down? Was it about money to have them spend less money? When I say them, I mean the federal government, or not federal government, but the Council of UK. They can spend less money on heating and cooling the structure because of the installation. Do you think that Jeremy Corbyn, Theresa May, Conservative Party, Labour Party, do you think that any one of them or all of them have some blood on their hands? Are they complicit in what happened here? Whatever your comments are, let me know in the comments below. And that's all I got to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.